Okay, so I need you to actually think about this for a second. Because I have been sitting with this question for weeks now, and the more I dig into it, the more it messes with my head. What if Gojo Satoru was never sealed? Not in a surface level way where you just go, oh, well then everyone lives happily ever after. I mean, really think about what that world looks like. Because I did think about it. I went through every single piece of information the series gives us about Gojo, about Kenjaku, about the Culling Game, about what each character becomes after that moment in Shibuya. And what I found genuinely disturbed me. Because the alternate timeline where Gojo wins is not the good ending everyone assumes it is. In some ways, it might actually be the worst possible outcome for humanity. And by the time we finish this video, I think you are going to agree with me. But before we get there, we need to start at the beginning. We need to talk about what Gojo Satoru actually is to this world. And I do not mean strongest sorcerer alive. That description does not even come close to capturing it. Think about the threat architecture of Jujutsu Kaisen for a moment. You have special grade cursed spirits that can level entire city districts, existing in numbers that should overwhelm the Jujutsu world if they were ever properly coordinated. You have Sukuna sitting at what is essentially full power, being described by every single character in the series as something that cannot be killed. And then you have Gojo, who beats him. Not barely, not at great personal cost, not through some clever trick that exploits a weakness. He beats him. And that single fact is the load-bearing wall of the entire Jujutsu Kaisen universe. Every threat, every villain, every plan that any antagonist in this series ever puts together has to start from the same question. How do we deal with Gojo first? Kenjaku understood this better than anyone, and honestly, when you look at how long he spent preparing for that one moment, it becomes genuinely staggering. This man has been alive for over 1,000 years. He has been threading himself through the history of Jujutsu society for centuries, manipulating bloodlines and institutions, and hidden currents of power that most people do not even know exist. And the single most critical variable in his entire plan across 1,000 years of preparation was not the Culling Game, it was not the merger, it was not Sukuna's resurrection. It was getting Gojo Satoru into a box. Everything else was downstream of that one moment. Which means that before we can talk about what happens if it does not work, we need to talk about why it almost did not work. Because this is the part most people gloss over, and it completely changes how you understand the whole thing. Gojo sensed something was wrong. His instincts, the same instincts that have kept him alive through every attempt on his life since he was a teenager, told him the situation was not what it appeared to be. And he hesitated anyway. Not because he was weak, not because he was careless, because he saw what appeared to be Hibara, a student who died because Gojo could not save him. Kenjaku did not beat Gojo with power because there is no power in that universe that beats Gojo directly. He beat him with guilt. He beat him with the specific emotional vulnerability of a man who is simultaneously the strongest person alive and someone who carries enormous grief about every person he was not there for. And this is where our alternate timeline actually has to begin. Because the version of events where Gojo is not sealed does not start with him being stronger. It starts with him being just a little bit more suspicious on one specific afternoon. He sees through it. His grief is still there, it does not just disappear, but in this version he recognizes the manipulation for what it is, even through the pain. He attacks first. And here is where everything changes in ways that feel like a clean victory at first, but get progressively more complicated the longer you think about them. The moment Gojo does not enter that box, three things happen at the same time, and they cascade into each other in really interesting ways. The first thing is that Kenjaku's entire timeline falls apart immediately. The Culling Game cannot start with Gojo free. Kenjaku is not reckless, and he is not stupid, and there is absolutely no version of events where he activates a battlefield full of awakened sorcerers while Gojo Satoru is loose and able to intervene. Every colony he spent decades preparing becomes useless overnight, because Gojo can simply walk into any one of them and end it. The whole game board just disappears. The second thing that happens is Mahito. Mahito is terrifying, specifically because Gojo is not present during the period when he develops and acts. With Gojo active and unsuppressed, Mahito never gets the runway to become what he becomes. His most devastating moments, and you know exactly which ones I mean without me having to say it, never happen. And the third thing, which is the one that has the biggest long-term implications, is that Sukuna's full resurrection is in serious trouble. Because Sukuna needs Megumi as a vessel, and Megumi's vulnerability to that manipulation is entirely a product of the chaos and loss that accumulates in the post-sealing world. A world where Gojo was never sealed is a world where Megumi never ends up in the position that makes him exploitable. Which means Sukuna stays fragmented. Which means the King of Curses never reaches full power. On paper, this sounds like an absolute victory. And that is exactly why it is such a trap. Here's the thing about Gojo Satoru that the series has been quietly building since the very first episode. He does not think the current Jujutsu society is worth preserving. He thinks it is corrupt and broken and held together by power structures that protect the people at the top at the expense of everyone below them. His whole approach to teaching, the way he treats his students as equals, the way he pushes them to question authority and develop independent judgment, none of that is accidental. He is not just teaching them to be strong sorcerers. He is trying to build the people who will replace the system he despises. So now think about what a quick, clean Gojo victory actually looks like from that lens. The higher-ups survive. The same institutions that produced the conditions that turned Geto Suguru into what he became, that sacrificed Haibara, that treats sorcerers below a certain grade as essentially disposable, all of it continues because there was never a catastrophic enough rupture to force a reckoning. And this is where the alternate timeline gets genuinely dark in a way I was not expecting when I started thinking about it. Because Gojo being present stunts everyone around him. Not on purpose. He would hate that characterization. But when the person who can solve any problem is in the room, nobody else is ever forced to become someone who can solve problems. Yuji never develops into who he needs to be without the absolute horror of navigating the post-sealing world on his own. Yuta never comes back and steps into the role that only he can fill. Nanami never gets the defining moment that makes his arc what it is. Every single character's growth in Jujutsu Kaisen is downstream of Gojo's absence. The students needed him gone, not because they were better off without his protection, but because they needed to discover they could stand without it. But I want to go even deeper than that, because there is a version of this alternate timeline that I think is genuinely the most tragic outcome possible. Gojo wins. He defeats Kenjaku, neutralizes the immediate threat, and then stands in a world that is still fundamentally broken in all the ways it was broken before. Because here is what a lot of people miss. Sukuna is still inside Yuji. The fingers are still out there. And the merger, the process of fusing the physical and spirit worlds, is not something Kenjaku invented. It is a natural process that he was accelerating. Stopping Kenjaku delays it. It does not stop it. So Gojo is standing in a world where he has won every battle that was placed in front of him, and is facing the slow realization that the actual problem was never a problem he could punch. He cannot dismantle systemic corruption with infinity. He cannot reverse the slow erosion of the boundary between worlds with hollow purple. And he knows this. It is the whole reason he became a teacher in the first place. He was always trying to build the people who could do what he could not. In the alternate timeline where he is never sealed, he is forced to live inside the most painful version of his own limitations. Strong enough to win every single fight, and not strong enough to win the actual war. Because the actual war was never against Sukuna or Kenjaku specifically. It was against the conditions that produce a Sukuna and a Kenjaku. And that war can only be won by a generation that survived something catastrophic and came out the other side changed by it. So here is the conclusion I keep coming back to, no matter how many times I run this alternate timeline. Gojo Satoru was never the solution. He was the bridge. The person strong enough to hold the door open long enough for the next generation to walk through. Look at every single interaction he has with Yuji, with Megumi, with Nobara. He is not building students who need him. He is building students who can replace him. He is actively trying to make himself unnecessary. And the brutal irony that I think the series is pointing at is that Kenjaku, in sealing him, accidentally fulfilled Gojo's actual purpose. By taking Gojo out of the equation, he forced exactly the world that Gojo had been trying to engineer from the beginning. A world where young sorcerers had to stand on their own. A world that could not lean on the strongest anymore. A world that had no choice but to become something new because the old thing had been shattered beyond repair. In the alternate timeline where Gojo wins clean and fast, he survives and lives out the rest of his life as the strongest man in a world that never changed. That is not a victory. That might be the loneliest ending in the whole series. So now I want to know what you think. Because here's the question that has been sitting in my head through this entire video. If Gojo could see both timelines, if he could look at the world where he wins and nothing changes, versus the world where he is sealed and his students become something extraordinary, which one does he choose? Because honestly, I think he already knew. I think he walked into that box with some part of him understanding what his absence would mean for the people he loved. And I think that is the most Gojo thing he could have ever done. Not saving everyone himself, making sure they could save themselves without him. Drop your answer in the comments right now, because I genuinely want to know if you agree with me or if you think I am completely wrong about this. If this video made you see Gojo differently, hit the like button, because it really does help this channel more than you know. Subscribe to Totaru-kun for more theories that go places the anime never takes you. And I will catch you in the next one.